Hello everybody, my name is Katya and I'm your local geography nerd, and today I want to touch on how misunderstandings of geography can have detrimental outcomes, not only for someone's personal views, how it can harm the way that someone sees other people from other nations, but more specifically how it can actually cause the downfall of a nation specifically. And this might sound kind of crazy, but the reason I want to talk about this is because of an interaction I've had recently. On TikTok, I have spoken in depth about how, modern online debate is harmful. I made a video on that already, but I still have a bad habit of going on these live streams and debating because unfortunately I get very passionate about certain topics. If I feel like I, disagree or agree, but I feel like I know a lot about the topic or I'm passionate about it, I would love to have a conversation. So I had come across this live stream that this woman was hosting, and it basically was saying mass deportation is good. We need to get them out of here. And I was a bit intrigued, but I wanted to see what was going on. And the first thing I picked up on is that this person seemed to be thinking in very black and white thinking. Immigrants bad, we need them out, everything good. Like basically like that. Not like verbatim, but that was the kind of vibe that I was getting from this whole conversation. First instance that happened before I even joined was this person came up and was like, we don't need to just kick out all immigrants. Every person of color needs to be gone from America, out of here. And the hostess was upset at this rhetoric. And I don't really blame her, but at the same time, I wanted to say that you are creating an environment where you're fostering this kind of, narrative. And I highly doubt that the majority of people who do agree with the mass deportation would think that having a completely white nation would be, amazing. There are people who think like that, but I definitely don't think it's the majority. But when you're talking in such vague and general ways, very black and white thinking, and specifically associating all immigrants with being people from the global south, that is where this kind of rhetoric very much becomes, they think that it's a comfortable space to express that, because often it is. But I eventually came up there and I asked them a question, which is, what do you think the economic outcome will be of having such a mass deportation? Because whenever we talk, they didn't really give me much of an answer, but we could have a conversation of, maybe figuring out how to get a better process of getting into the country legally. Maybe we could talk about, working with the government of other countries to try to make sure that, their country is safer and whatever, but we're not having that conversation. The conversation that we're having is very black and white. And unfortunately, where we currently are in the state of America is that our system heavily relies on the backs of immigrants, specifically illegal immigrants. Economically, obviously, having such a mass scale deportation, especially quickly, would have horrible outcomes economically. But she made one point, and it intrigued me, and that's what made me want to talk about this. She said, for quote unquote, Poland is the only country in Europe that is not having an immigration problem. And I was a bit stunned by this because I didn't know if she was joking or not, but based on her language beforehand, I thought that she probably believed it. She probably saw it online or somewhere like that, which is usually how, rhetoric like this starts. And I said, no, that's definitely not true. There are places like Monaco. She was unaware what Monaco even was. And I talked about how Monaco, it is very hard to even get in. It is hard to even buy a house. It is like most expensive place to live as a country. And she had no idea about that. I mentioned Vatican City as well, which made her ears perk up. And she was like, well, Vatican City is not a country, it's a city. Yes, Vatican City is a city and also a country. Same with Singapore. Singapore is technically a city and a country. That's just the way it is. But, in Europe, you have very, very tiny countries. It is not similar at all to the United States. And that's where this rhetoric becomes dangerous. People start believing that systems that are put in place in these tiny, itty bitty countries in Europe will work for a place like America, where we have a massive population and massive landmass. It is insane. If you were to take Europe and slide it over, if we take Russia out of the equation and we take all countries that are not Russia or Greenland and we put them in America, they would all fit. America is a ginormous place and we lose sight of this. And the other thing that I want to talk about whenever it comes to people having this misunderstanding and willful ignorance is why they do not care. Because there is a very common mindset online that people do not want to be wrong. Ever. And I think I might have talked about this before, but this mindset kind of comes from everything is online. Everything on the internet is going to be there forever. Even if you're live stream, people are going to be recording. People are going to take screenshots. People are going to download your videos. Even if you delete a video, there's a good chance that someone has it. If you have more than 10 followers, people are nosy. They want your videos. I've done it before. Probably your best friend has done it before. Your grandpa's probably done it before. That's just how the internet is. So when we have conversations in real life, it is extremely more common to have people be like, oh, I didn't know that. I'm incorrect about that. That rarely happens online because everything is recorded and people want to have a really, really good reputation for never being wrong. And when we talk about live streams on TikTok, there is a very common theme of people saying 11-0, undefeated debater. There's probably not a single actual debater in this world who is undefeated. Getting defeated in a debate or even getting proven wrong in a conversation is really good. It inspires you to want to look further into a topic that you were wondering about. For example, one of the biggest debates that I ever lost was whenever I was talking about trans women. And even though I still think that trans women are women, this person did win the debate because I asked them to bring up any instances where this thing they were talking about has happened because I didn't think there were any. And they actually did bring it up with evidence. And I lost. And I actually really thought like, wow, that was really awesome. You had that prepared. I'm going to go dive deeper into the information so that this doesn't happen again. That is healthy. That's what makes a good debate, is acknowledging whenever you are wrong and conceding to certain points that you might have been mistaken about. In this conversation, I never got I didn't know Vatican City was a country. Even whenever you had the proof right there, they would not admit it. And that's because of their online reputation. They want it to be squeaky clean. But another thing that happens whenever we talk about a misunderstanding of geography and how this can actually turn into really dangerous rhetoric, traditionalism. I think most people, if you're online, you've seen the rise of trad wives. Feminism bad, traditional good, gay bad, nuclear family good, that kind of thinking. And this has been thriving on TikTok a lot. And I have probably been in these trad wife lives so many times to the point where having this specific conversation gets exhausting because I always like to bring up geography, as I do, and I always talk about, also, I want to point out before I say this, when I'm talking about traditionalists, I'm not talking about people who just prefer being in a traditional household. If you, as a woman, want to stay at home and cook and clean and have your husband bring in, or your wife, I don't discriminate, and have, your partner bring in whatever, and have them pay for everything, that's great. I think that's wonderful. If you have trust in someone to provide that for you, and you are in a healthy relationship and you have all your needs met, I think that's wonderful. I'm not talking about those people. I am talking about individuals who are traditionalists and want to impose that on everyone else's way of living. People who say that women should not be working, women should not have the right to vote, Pearl Davis, for example, or, women should stay home, they should stop dressing this way. It extends to basically an entire thing that's anti-feminist, pro-patriarchy, women just should stay home, whatever. That's basically the narrative. So when I talk to these women, because most of the time they're women, which is very ironic, but nonetheless, I will usually bring up the same point. You want to implement traditionalism onto other people. You think that it would have the best outcome for the nation as a whole. But when we look at countries who foster traditionalism in law, in society, etc., these countries systematically fail. Historically, they fail. And countries that take on this more progressive approach or even become more secular tend to succeed way more. And whenever I bring this up, and I'll say, do you know what the top 5 countries on happiness and health and all that have been? And they don't know. And I'll tell them, and how do I expect them to believe me? If they don't know, they're probably not going to believe a word I say. If they've never heard of what I'm talking about, you really think that they'll believe me? If I tell you, oh yeah, aliens are real, the Goople Gopple Gorp is the leader of the Clinton, you're not going to believe me because you'd never even have heard the point that I'm talking about, that I'm bringing up to you. And when we combine this mindset of never wanting to be wrong and being brought up in terms of geography, and how a lot of Americans are very undereducated in terms of geography, you don't want to know. You don't care to know. Because if you know, and you know that countries that foster what you're trying to implement systematically fail, then that would really turn down your argument. That is one of the best ways to see if what you're fighting for will be good, by looking at a variety, keyword variety, of places who have done this with different populations, different land masses, different geographical areas, whatever. Has it succeeded overall or has it failed overall? We can look at different government systems and how they've failed and succeeded. We can look at different ways. For example, in some countries, socialism will really, 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 really work. It will work. Same with communism. Communism can absolutely work. Certain parts of the world, it can't. That's just the type of, system that we live in. But people don't want to think that. They want to think that what they believe can be universal. And unfortunately, that's not possible. Specifically when we talk about traditionalism and wanting to implement something into law. And if I bring up that when we do this, it systematically fails, this just becomes an act of denying. They want that squeaky clean reputation. They want to believe that they are right. But right now I'm just talking about people on the internet. what happens when this extends to people in power. Because in the United States, we have city government, we have town government, we have county government, we have state government, we have federal government, etc. And when people start becoming elected into government and already have this lack of geographic education and then start having this rhetoric of wanting more traditionalism, what happens then? What happens when we continue to ignore what has failed systematically around the world and we try to implement that into our country? It's not going to be a good outcome. And I mean, if you want to be trusted and loved by the people, why would you tell them to be educated on this subject anyways? If you really want the votes and you believe in this certain way of thinking, why the hell would you introduce them to something that would completely contradict your way of thinking, something that would prove your way of thinking incorrect? You don't want to do that. And that's why I believe that a lot of people in power continue to refuse any sort of geographical education, refuse the acknowledgement of other countries around the world, and examining the features that have made them succeed and that have made them fail. And the reason why we do this is because we don't actually care. We want to hold power, we want the votes, and we want the people to be more stupid because then they're easier to control. It's been seen time and time again, and I would hate to see us repeat it. But that's all I have to say for today. It got a bit dark at the end, literally and figuratively. The sun just went down. How beautiful. But anyway, thank you for watching my video. And today's fact of the day is that Africa has 54 countries, is the second largest continent with 20% of land's area, with Earth's land area. How about that? Have a great one.